Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Inclusion 101. We are so happy to have you with us to talk about something incredibly important, which is digital inclusion. So let me go over some housekeeping things before we begin. So first, the webinar will be recorded, it's being recorded now, and the recording slides and additional resources will be shared after this webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A chat so that we can collect it and then answer them at the end, just to keep the flow moving. And hello, camera. Hello. Good morning from Missouri. Awesome. So here is the agenda for today. We are going to first talk about the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. If you are new to this community or you're not familiar or you're new to digital inclusion work, we're going to introduce ourselves for you. And then we'll talk about digital inclusion definitions. We're going to understand the different barriers to digital inclusion and do a fun activity. We'll then jump into the major solutions we see communities on the ground doing. We'll briefly talk about the digital navigator model and how you can get more involved into the digital navigator support that we have. And we will then talk about digital inclusion coalitions, important policy that you should know about, joining the NDIA community, and then have a place for you to ask your questions. All right. I will introduce myself and then pass it over to my awesome colleague, Shauna. So hi, everybody. I am Pamela, she, they. I am the training and community manager with NDIA. I'm very excited to be able to do these bi-monthly Digital Inclusion 101 webinars, and I also lead our community calls and help manage our very robust listserv. And I am from Madison, Wisconsin. Shauna, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Edson, and I'm a senior policy manager here at NDIA. My pronouns are she, her, and I am based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And our policy team works on advocating for digital inclusion and digital equity policy at the state and federal level. So happy to be here today.
Thank you, Shauna. Shauna will be leading the policy section. No better person than the wonderful Shauna Edson for that. So if you have any policy questions, make sure to put that in the Q&A chat. All right. So briefly, who is NDIA? NDIA, we stand for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we help advance digital equity by supporting community programs like yours and equipping policymakers to act. We are a nonprofit organization, and we represent over 2,000 affiliates, 47 tribal entities, and in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands for affordable broadband, access to devices, and digital skills training and support. I just want to check if my sound is still, is it good for other folks? Okay. Kamara, I think it might have to be your personal sound. All right, just wanted to make sure. And another thing I want to talk about with NDIA is that we are a knowledge sharing forum. So we have things like working groups for digital navigators, and we also have policy working groups and coalition working groups. We also have our monthly community calls. We have a very popular NDIA listserv. And so in these knowledge sharing forums, we learn what is and isn't working on the ground, what issues that our community members are facing, and then after hearing that, we align our advocacy efforts with that. All right, so let's get straight to it. Let's talk about some definitions. The first one that a lot of folks are familiar with is the digital divide. So this is the gap between those who have affordable access to the internet, skills, digital skills, and support to effectively engage online, and those who do not. And the digital divide, this has existed since the beginning of the internet. But I think we all saw how the pandemic really showed to everybody that many communities don't have the same access, skills, and support to engage online. It really exposed that reality. So what did that look like? What did we see? We saw cost. So people having to cut their internet service because it was too expensive. We saw it exposed through education. So we saw students falling behind in classes because they couldn't connect to their virtual classroom, or they didn't have the necessary skills to be able to, navigate Blackboard or be able to navigate their devices. And also the job market, folks not being able to participate online in the competitive job market because they might not have a device. The device is not matching what that specific job is requiring, or they don't have the essential skills to apply for those jobs. They don't have the skills to create a resume, to open a Word doc or a Google Doc, to type out a cover letter, or not being able to know how to upload their resume online. And also not having a solid internet connection, right? If you are applying for a job, you will need to have a solid internet connection. And if you can't afford that, that's going to definitely take you out of that competitive job market. And we also saw the lack of infrastructure, the lack of broadband infrastructure. So communities not having access to the internet because either the infrastructure isn't there or the infrastructure is outdated. So why does this gap exist? It exists because of the underinvestment in broadband in low-income communities. So an investigation by the Markup found that residents of historically redlined areas receive significantly slower internet speeds. And that looks like digital redlining. So digital redlining, it's discrimination by internet service providers, or ISPs for short, in deployment, maintenance, upgrade, or delivery of services. And Shauna put that investigative journalism link in the chat for you all to read. It's a really great resource there. Next up is the term digital equity. So this is the goal. And I want to first give some background into NDIA's definition of the term and how we define all of our terms. So when NDIA was created in 2015, one of our first priorities was to collaborate with our community with the goal of developing accurate language for on-the-ground work. And I'm sure if you talk to other people about what digital equity means, and you actually describe to them, it's like, oh, it's when people are able to access the internet with a device and the digital skills, people are going to be like, oh, there's an actual term for that? Yes. And we created that through collaborating with our community. So through that collaboration, we're creation of terms like digital equity and digital inclusion. And our community is always going to be our primary source when developing vocabulary around our movement. So the definition, digital equity, it's that condition where everyone in our community can get online and use the internet in the way that they want to. And we like to say that digital equity, it enables all of our community members to engage, participate, and be active members in our society and have a voice. Digital equity creates community power. So this looks like, in terms of education and advocacy, being able to stay up to date on current events. So I want to briefly share a story about Miss Wang. She is a 73-year-old Chinese immigrant woman. And before taking classes at Community Tech Network, she had to walk 7 blocks to get information, to get news updates about what's going on back home in China for her. But now, after taking digital skills classes, she can easily stay up to date by going on her phone and searching news online that way. Other ways is being able to advocate for causes that are very important to you, and also finding community around shared interests. Other benefits of digital equity is that it creates support for people experiencing homelessness. So being able to find community resources through their phone, or being able to go to a computer lab to find that, being able to access housing information, enrolling in government programs, and staying connected with their loved ones. A lot of times that you need to be able to use the internet to do that. It also shows up in healthcare. So being able to utilize telehealth services, that also looks like getting a diagnosis remotely, especially if you don't have access to that locally in your area. It also looks like being able to manage your medical bills online, looking at your MyChart, and scheduling appointments online. And then beyond necessity comes enrichment, right? Digital equity allows for more of an enriching life for those who want to partake. So that includes learning new skills like cooking, learning how to cook a new recipe, being able to learn a new instrument, learning a new language. A lot of times, it creates an opportunity for people to stay connected to their family who speak a different language or learn more about their cultural history. And it's also a place, an opportunity to find your special community. So being able to join online communities or a forum based on your shared interests. And it also looks like staying connected to your friends and family who live far away. All right, so why digital equity? So the image on the left, well, both images, they have the same amount of books. So the image on the left has 6 books. The image on the right also has 6 books. And to put bluntly, equality does not serve our communities, right? So equality, it's where everyone gets the same resources, same opportunities, and same solutions. Equity, it recognizes the different circumstances and barriers. Therefore, it distributes resources effectively so that everybody can reach an equal outcome. So you can see that in the image here. On the left, everybody's getting 3 books and nothing has really changed in terms of them being at the same kind of starting point, right? And on the right side, there's still the same amount of books, but it's distributed properly by looking at the different needs. So now everybody is starting at that same height. And digital equity, it means meeting people where they are, which requires understanding of specific challenges to internet and effective use. It also looks like understanding the barriers, and that barriers look different between communities. So a digital skills class in San Francisco that has multiple multilingual instructors of various Asian languages, that's a solution there because of the community that exists there, versus maybe a rural community that doesn't have that much diversity in terms of language. It wouldn't make sense to have a bunch of digital inclusion instructors with various Asian languages if that's not a need there, And so equity, it demands that we avoid making assumptions of what those barriers look like, therefore making assumptions of what those solutions are. All right. And so achieving digital equity, it means learning the community needs. So for example, trainers and training. So again, looking at what languages exist there and making sure that the trainers match that, or the trainers having that shared lived experience with the community that you're serving. So that could be, somebody who has also had to go through the same process of applying for government benefits that those community members are looking to learn how to do, because that builds trust and relatability. When you're thinking about event accessibility, is the location physically accessible? Is it a safe space for that community? Not for you, but for that community. Can they access that place easily through public transport? Is the event free of charge? Is it at a time and a date that makes sense for that community? And most importantly, did you speak with the trusted community leaders? Not all of us come from that same background as a community that we serve. That's okay. There are still ways to learn how to effectively, work with that community. And a lot of it is speaking with trusted community leaders. And then through that conversation, making sure that your program is structured based on that community's unique needs. All right. And the last term is digital inclusion. So we like to say this is the work. So it's those activities that are necessary to achieve digital equity, like access to reliable and affordable high-speed internet, access to affordable and appropriate devices that matches what the user needs to do online, and then providing digital skills training and support. And here are the different elements of digital inclusion, a fun graphic, the road to digital equity. So again, having affordable high-speed internet, affordable and appropriate devices, access to digital skills training, because it's a continuous learning effort, having access to quality tech support, and being able to go online and that online content being designed to enable self-sufficiency. All right. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to put it in the Q&A. But now we're going to do an activity to kind of learn about the different barriers that your communities have. So I want you all to kind of think about what prevents people in your community from consistently connecting to the internet and using it effectively. And when I say community, it can be your physical location, but it can also be your identity. right? Thank you, Shauna, for putting the Padlet link in the chat. Go ahead and click on that link, and I will pause my screen share so we can see what people are typing in. Thank you, Kevin. If you're not able to access the Padlet, you can put your answers in the chat as well. And to put an answer in the chat, you go ahead and click that plus sign on the bottom right. It'll turn into a pencil. You can type your answer here and then click publish. And Kevin and Jason both said money in fun different ways. Yes, cost is definitely a huge barrier for somebody. Cost is going to be the reason why somebody doesn't have an internet subscription or have that device. Kamara says no Wi-Fi, so not yet, not having that internet available. So what does that mean? It means they'd have to go to the library or Taco Bell or McDonald's, or places that have kind of like a community access to community Wi-Fi. Magdalena says fear, both of the unknown and dangers, both real and imagined. Magdalena, thank you for sharing that. Yes, fear alone can be what will hinder somebody from even considering wanting to check out an internet subscription or devices and stuff like that. You know, it's very easy to look online right now and see, you know, like, okay, people's data is getting leaked out there. I don't want my data leaked. Or there might be a lot of misconceptions about the internet, or thinking that there's absolutely no way that you can prevent getting hacked or seeing those things that is happening to other people. Tiara says resources. Exactly, not having the right resources or not knowing that digital inclusion programs exist in your community, right? Jay Baker says lack of resources. Hello, fellow Pam. Pam says having internet and computer, so that's definitely a barrier too. If you don't have a computer, then you're missing a key element of being able to get online. Cost and language. Larissa says user age, I'm a librarian, and the people who have the most trouble are older. They find technology overwhelming. Right. So exactly, Larissa, and like you, shout out to the librarians out there. You know, librarians, it's wonderful, great, because this is where somebody who has those fears and has a lot of overwhelm with the internet, they can meet a friendly face and like answer those questions, build that trust with the librarian, the resources, but also the internet and themselves to gain those digital skills to use the internet in a very safe way. Y'all have really volunteered. This is like the most folks have volunteered on this activity. This is great. Charming says, needing to do multi-step verification to do almost anything on the internet. Absolutely, that is a huge barrier. Personally, I turn into a zombie whenever I have to do the multi-step. I just start groaning and everything. But that's for somebody who has those digital skills. For others, that is a huge task that might take another day. And that's enough for them to say, you know what, I'm just gonna ask another family member to do it or not deal with that at all. Erin, shout out to Erin. Hey, Erin says lack of safe, inclusive spaces to access tech and internet, specifically for LGBTQ plus communities. Absolutely. So again, like if those resources aren't in a safe space for that community to learn and utilize those resources, then you're missing the mark there. Time constraints, Jay Baker says, time constraints can be an issue for some parents who work. Right, so if you are targeting parents, if parents are kind of your key demographic, do you have childcare services available so that they can come and learn the skills necessary and then not have to worry about that additional concern that they have? Marty, great question. Why do we assume everyone wants access? That's a good question. We don't assume that, right? Because we can't. There are people who, after learning the benefits of the internet, they say it's not for me, and that's okay. Our approach is we're not forcing people to get online. It's more so answering those questions, removing the barriers for those who want to get online. That's a really good point. All right. And then D says susceptibility to misinformation, so can't use the internet effectively. Yes, that's one of the foundational skills I'll be talking about later, is being able to understand that not everything you read online is true, is valid, and is safe. So being able to have the skills to discern like, okay, that type of website address, that's not a good address to click on. This isn't really a reputable news source, things like that. All right, I'm going to go back to my slides, but thank you all for participating. This is great. All right, so next up we have, this is just a slide that kind of outlines a lot of the things that we were talking about, right? So for broadband, for internet, it's unaffordable. Same thing for devices. Cost is a huge thing. Like setting up an internet subscription already can be very expensive for folks. Unreliable service. So if the weather is going out and your internet connectivity is, glitching, that can be a huge barrier. It can ruin someone's day, but also if you think about like having a job and you're doing a webinar or you're doing something that really requires a strong internet connection, that can be a huge barrier for your job as well. And then for devices is having an outdated software. That's another thing. I like to share that prior to coming into NDIA, I was working in domestic violence work. And so when the pandemic hit, everything went remote. Including the virtual court hearings, as well as, resources like connecting with your legal advocate. So a lot of our clients, we had to ask them, do you have a device at home? Because at the shelter, there was only one computer. And we were doing a lot of, social distancing at the time. And so if there was a device, great. The next step, can you download Zoom? Does it have a webcam? No? Okay. And if yes, great. So outdated software is not just about having a device, it's about, is that software matching what they need to do? And then with digital skills, we talked about fear and shame, having limited skills, not knowing that there are programs out there to help, and then having inaccessible trainings, or the trainings are not in safe spaces for communities. So the solution here is having affordable broadband, affordable devices, and digital skills training, which is what we see our communities providing. All right, so first I want to talk about affordable and low-cost broadband. So the city of Portland, they conducted a Portland broadband equity study, a really great resource if you want to just check out what the digital divide looks like in Portland, but also really great for getting quotes and storytelling. And one of their residents that they interviewed shared this quote, which I think really highlights the kind of gamble that people are having to choose. So they said, it's a choice between food and all the other things we need for having internet, which the kids need for school, right? So again, the internet is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. If the things you're thinking about when you're thinking about internet service is food and school, then this really shows the type of sacrifices our community members have to make when budgeting internet into their already tight budget. All right. So let's talk about broadband briefly. So broadband, it's that transmission of wide bandwidth data over high-speed internet connection. And so the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, their broadband definition, they redefined it in March 2024, so last year. And also the FCC, they are the federal agency in charge of wired and wireless communications. And so March 2024, they have defined the minimum standard to be 100 megabits for download and 20 megabits for upload, which is a significant increase from their previous standard, which I believe was created in 2013 or 2015, around that time. And before that was 25 download and 3 megabits for upload. And so why does broadband matter, right? Again, high-speed home internet connection, it's a necessity, it's not a luxury. So some of examples of broadband's importance is, think about how you paid your last bill. Was that through an app? Was that online? Did you go to their website, right? And now think about if you can't pay that bill online, how do you have to restructure your day and a work day to submit that payment? Another one is government access. So accessing and submitting essential government forms and documents. For people who are traveling after May 7, you're gonna have to figure out what documents you need to get a real ID for that golden star sticker at the top right of your ID. So how else are you going to find that without having to go there? It's through online. We talked about healthcare access, so virtual meetings with healthcare professionals. This is super crucial for underserved communities. And it also helps level the playing field for certain communities. So through like remote work and having access to higher paying jobs and improve your skill development, and also in terms of education, having access to courses that are not locally available. Those are some of the benefits of having home internet service. And so this leads us to our next definition, which is broadband adoption. This is daily internet access at high speeds that is necessary for common online tasks with necessary digital skills to participate online and on a personal device and a secure, convenient network. So digital inclusion programs that focus on low cost and affordable connectivity. So there are two types of approaches that we usually see. So the first one is a technical approach. So this includes being a community-owned internet service provider. So they're the ones directly providing internet connectivity. And it also looks like providing internet access in community spaces and buildings. So for example, the Chicago Housing Authority. So the Chicago Housing Authority, they have 9 digital resource centers that are located in various properties of theirs and community centers. And so in these digital resource centers, there is open access to computers, there's a computer lab, there is tech support, somebody who is there to provide, to help somebody walk through how to use the computer or the internet. And then they also have special programs for residents in relation to digital skills. So that's kind of one way that you see digital inclusion programs happen. Another approach is support and guidance. So this looks like educating community members about available low-cost internet plans, and then providing guidance on how to access these plans, whether it's filling out the application with them. That could be an example. So for anyone that is doing that as part of their digital inclusion work, we've got great resources for you. In fact, all of our resources at NDIA are free. And so we encourage practitioners who are helping community members find internet plans near them. This is a really great resource for you. So NDIA, we compiled a list of current offers from internet service providers that matches 3 specific qualities or categories. So first is speed. So these plans, they have speed at or above that threshold of 100 megabits for downloading and 20 megabits for uploading. These plans in terms of cost have a maximum monthly subscription of $30 a month. And then in terms of data caps, these plans include either having no data cap or it's above 1 terabyte. Another great resource for you is the Digital Inclusion Program Manual. This is great for if you are starting a digital inclusion program, or it's also great for folks who are seasoned or you just started your digital inclusion work, because it's a resource full of best practices and recommendations from the NDIA community, so from digital inclusion programs. So in there, you will find best practices and recommendations in terms of program development. You'll also learn recommendations and examples on program models and techniques, as well as how to develop a sustainable program. So that in there includes effective community engagement, evaluation methods, and strategic partnerships. All right. Next up is we're going to talk about devices, both affordable and appropriate devices. So when it comes to digital inclusion programs with a focus on devices, it can show up in different ways. So first, these digital inclusion programs, they can be the one providing the actual device. So they're offering free or low-cost devices to community members, whether that is tablets, laptops, a smartphone. Another one is providing ongoing tech support. So this looks like providing device maintenance services and then also tech support. Another type of digital inclusion program when it comes to devices is a learn to earn model. So this is where students who complete a digital skills class receive a device. And then there are also refurbishing and recycling programs. So this is a source for quality, low-cost computers and an opportunity for community members to learn about device hardware. And so here we have a chart that briefly outlines kind of the pros and cons of the three popular devices. This is a short version of a bigger chart that the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, NDIA, and AARP developed together, which is also on that resource page that was shared at the beginning. So in that document, there's also the desktop. But first, for mobile phones, they're great. They're small and portable. They have a long battery life. And the cons is that it does not replace a laptop. It's insufficient for extensive work or remote learning. It's really great for app usage, light internet browsing, and communicating on the go. Tablets are great for entertainment, like streaming, binge watching Netflix, things like that. Also have a long battery life. And what's great about them is that they're more accessible. That touchscreen it's a bigger keyboard, and that large display also has like that easy interface. The cons is that you typically cannot make calls unless you have that cellular data plan, and some apps might not be compatible with the tablet. And laptops, the pros is that it has a large file storage capacity. The cons is that it does have a shorter battery life, and generally it is the most expensive out of all the three. But it is best for working from home. That's kind of an essential device. It's great for remote learning and tasks that require significant processing power and storage. And also other things to consider when it comes to devices is those assistive technologies. So a second monitor. How many of us are using a second monitor right now? I am. It also looks like having a camera if your device doesn't have a camera and you need a camera for work, or if you're doing presentations, a proper speaker if the speaker on your device isn't working properly or isn't sufficient enough, a portable charger if you're on the go, wireless keyboard and mouse. So those are kind of other assistive things to think about too. It's not just these three main devices. All right, and so an example that I want to share is Tech Goes Home. So they partner with social service organizations throughout Massachusetts to deliver digital skills classes for adults. And their courses, they're offered at multiple locations. So it can be like libraries, community centers, public housing, and other nonprofit organizations. And they do that learn to earn model. So each learner, after completing a digital skills course, they will receive a Chromebook and, if needed, 12 months of internet service. So this is kind of an example of a digital inclusion organization that they're kind of covering those different prongs of digital inclusion. Next up is digital skills training. All right, so digital skills programs can be offered in different ways. So they can be through classes for community members at various skill levels. It can be through that one-on-one support and learning. And then it can also be a community support helpline for assistance and for answering questions like, where can I find a low-cost or free or low-cost device? And I want to reiterate that it's important to understand where your community or where your students' proficiency level is at. So again, because of equity, we are avoiding making assumptions about people's skills. Just because somebody is a certain age, a certain demographic, has a certain degree, has a certain type of job, we cannot assume that they have certain types of digital skills. So a crucial step here is to conduct a needs assessment. So through that, you're able to determine where their existing skill level is at, and then identify what skills that community member wants to learn. Then you take the results from that needs assessment and then develop your program that way. And the Essential Digital Skills Framework is a framework that NDIA recommends, and it's intended to support adults who are looking to improve their digital skills. So some of the categories in this essential digital skills framework includes for communicating. So like being able to communicate, share information online through your device. So that looks like being able to set up an email account, being able to post messages, pictures, or content on social media, knowing how to use a word processing app to create documents like a cover letter or a resume. And then also being able to communicate with others digitally through email or a text messaging app. Another category revolves around handling information and content, which I think somebody had shared during the activity. So understanding that not all information that is online is accurate, is reliable, and that it's safe. And also being able to search for news on a browser like Chrome or Safari, or being able to download an app. Another category here is transacting. So being able to set up an online account for public services or for buying goods online, being able to upload your resume on a recruiting website, being able to book a plane ticket or make a reservation, those type of skills. And so a great example here is Community Tech Network. That was the organization from the story I had shared earlier. So what they do is they hire culturally competent, fluent speakers. And through that, they're able to offer classes in English, Spanish, Cantonese, Tagalog, Korean, Vietnamese, Russian, and Mandarin. And this is great because they go beyond just the translating of a flyer. It's community members feeling seen and feeling safe to ask questions in their language and in the way that they just naturally show up, and then having a multilingual instructor meet them with empathy and kind of guide them through their questions so that they feel comfortable. All right, digital navigators. Just two more categories, and digital navigators, they are doing amazing work, especially right now. So, we've covered the different aspects of digital inclusion, like broadband adoption, devices, digital skills. And one crucial element to this is connecting our community members to the internet with a person that helps walk them through that, whether it's internet service or digital skills, figuring out what their device does. And digital navigators, they are individuals who address the entire digital inclusion process with a community member through repeated interactions. So that looks like helping a community member find an affordable internet plan, helping them find a refurbished or low-cost device, and matching what that best device is with what that community member needs. And it also looks like, dismantling some myths regarding refurbished devices. Some people think that, if you're getting a refurbished device, you're getting a low-grade, low-quality device, but that's not true. And that can really help somebody get a low-cost, great device. And then also helping the community member with learning and expanding their digital skills. I like to say it's a holistic approach glued together by empathy, because, anybody can learn these skills, but a lot of barriers is how people feel when they are using the internet, how people feel when they're using the device. And nobody likes to feel that they are, that they're lacking, that they should have known this. Nobody likes to feel stupid. And we see that a lot. And digital navigators and people who approach these folks with a lot of empathy and compassion can really help a lot of those barriers. So a great resource that we have for you is our Digital Navigator model page. So the Digital Navigator model, it's an open and flexible model that can be adapted to fit the individual community member and also the organization that is utilizing a digital navigator. So NDIA and our community, we developed template materials and other resources to help support digital navigator programs. So if you check out that page, there you'll find skills assessments, follow-up surveys, a digital navigator job description, digital navigator toolkit, a Digital Navigator 101 webinar, and intake form and exit survey. We also have a Digital Navigator working group. So I'll talk more about how you can join that later, but that is also another resource that we have. And last but not least that I will be talking about is digital inclusion coalitions. So you are not alone in doing your work. Digital inclusion coalitions exist, and they are a group of community organizations that share the common concern of digital inclusion. So some example members include libraries, educational institutions, housing authorities, workforce development, sometimes internet service providers, social services, and civic organizations. So digital inclusion coalitions, they maximize the impact of digital inclusion efforts through three different effects. So first, with the advocacy effect, they help increase public awareness of digital inclusion issues. In terms of alignment, they help focus collaborative efforts on digital inclusion goals. So it looks like creating an alignment of perspectives among different community organizations. And then the network effect, it's another unique type of impact that digital inclusions have. This is where digital inclusions can enable organizations to learn from one another. It also creates it also fosters a deeper understanding of digital inclusion needs across different types of sectors and organizations. And it's also a great way to identify and build partnerships. So we recently updated our coalitions page, and on there is the results of our last fall we conducted a coalition survey, so you can see kind of the growth of how digital inclusion coalitions have changed from now since the beginning of the pandemic. And there's also a map, an interactive map on there. So if you are interested in seeing, hey, is there a digital inclusion near me? Check out the digital inclusion page, because there is a map where you can see where the closest one is near you. Here's an example of a digital inclusion coalition. So this is the Alliance for Digital Equity, based in Western Massachusetts. And so they're a coalition of community-focused organizations working together with the goal of digital equity. So here's a chart. You can see like the different types of organizations that exist within this coalition. And a great resource that we have for you is our Trailblazers page. So digital inclusion trailblazers are municipal, county, or regional governments that are paving the way and providing excellent models for digitally inclusive communities. So if you check out that digital inclusion trailblazers page, you're going to see a free and open knowledge database for digital inclusion resources that can be helpful for you. So you'll be able to see job descriptions, survey templates, and digital equity strategies that other governments are using that maybe you can apply for if you are working in government, but also just, you know, in your outreach strategies or in your digital inclusion program. All right, I'm done yapping for now. I will pass it over to Shauna to talk about policy.
Okay, thanks, Pamela. I'm going to go over some general policy that is centered around digital equity, and I'm going to start with the Digital Equity Act. Most of you may have heard of this by now, but I'm just going to start with a quick overview of the program. So the Digital Equity Act, or the DEA, was authorized by the Infrastructure Investment of Jobs Act, which is the IIJA of 2021. In the Digital Equity Act, there was $2.75 billion to establish 3 grant programs that promote digital equity and inclusion. The planning grant, the capacity grant, and the competitive grant programs. The first set of funds was the state planning grant program. The grant period ended, and now all states have digital equity plans, as well as territories. The State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program is the second set of funds available in the DEA. All states have been awarded funds. They're in the process of starting to implement the program. Then included in the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, there were funds for the Native Entities Capacity Grant. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In the Competitive Grant Program, it's the last bucket of funds in the Digital Equity Act. It began with the release of the NOFO in July 24th of last year, and all applications were due last September. Next slide, please. Like I mentioned, NTIA received all of its applications for the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Program, which and awarded $840 million in funding to states, territories, and Native entities. States will use these funds from this program to put their digital equity plans into action. This matters because you will see new digital inclusion activities and programs emerge in the next year, and states may award subgrants to organizations doing digital equity work in their state. We're already seeing some of those subgrant programs open up for applications. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, over the past 2 years, states and territories went through this rigorous planning process to write their digital equity plans, and included a lot of feedback sessions from community members, gathering data, and so forth to really identify the needs of their state. So these plans were created by states for states. Once awarded funds, the states will begin their activities, programs, and subgrants to support strategies to address barriers to digital equity that they identified while creating their plans. So NTIA requires these strategies include a focus on covered populations, which are the populations in their state that were identified as being most impacted by digital gaps or the digital divide. Implementing measurable strategies by collecting and analyzing data to show the success of activities the programs fund. So we want to make sure that the programs that the grant is paying for are effective. They also want to see long-lasting and meaningful change through sustainable programs. So that is also built into how states will use the funds. And encouraging ongoing stakeholder engagement to make sure that the folks that are being served have their needs met. All right, next slide, please. State subawards. So states and territories are allowed to subgrant their capacity award to eligible entities to help them implement their state digital equity plan. Subawards can support the implementation of the plan, facilitate digital inclusion activities that align with the plan, and they also need to report how these activities are going to the state. Some states may choose not to create a subgrant program. Each subgrant program, including things like eligibility criteria and the amount of funds that you can apply for, may vary based on the state. And states and territories will align their programs with the goals outlined in their digital equity plan. So if you're unsure if your state is offering a subgrant program, I would look at your state broadband office. All right, next slide, please. Like I mentioned before, the Native Entities Capacity Grant Program was part of the state capacity grant program. Applications opened in September of 2024 and were due in by February 7th of this year. This program allocates $45.3 million for Native entities, with awards ranging between $500,000 to $2 million. And these grants are competitive. That means that not everybody who applies will get funding. And this funds can be used for Native entities and tribes to create a digital equity plan and implement digital inclusion activities on tribal lands. All right, next slide, please. Our last bucket of funds in the DEA is a competitive grant program. So even though the application window has closed, I want to cover this because you may see new programs pop up over the next several years that are funded by the competitive grant program. And next slide. So the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program awards to eligible entities, including but not limited to organizations like local governments, nonprofits, and community anchor institutions. Congress set aside $1.25 billion for this program, which aims to build long-term capacity for bridging the digital divide across communities nationwide. Next slide, please. So the use of the grant funds. The applications were required to include digital inclusion activities that align with the state plans, enhance or go beyond what the state identified in their plans, or address barriers to digital equity that the state plan did not identify. Sometimes at the state level, they miss things that local and community-based organizations know about their community. And so these programs can support, these funds can support programs like that. Currently, there are 65 organizations recommended for the DEA Competitive Grant Program Award. The funds will be used to create programs to help people do things like talk to their doctors, take online classes, get jobs, avoid scams, all of the activities that Pamela has talked about so far today. Because most of the money has not been obligated to organizations that were recommended for award, we think that it might be at risk. And while ensuring that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly is really important, things like lengthy program pauses, new compliance hurdles, and other excessive requirements could leave organizations unable to carry out their programs effectively or force organizations that were waiting for this funding to walk away altogether. This means that residents of all ages could lose access to digital essential tools and training needed to compete in the modern economy, getting jobs, protecting themselves against digital threats, cybersecurity, and again, all of the great things that Pamela talked about that people are able to benefit from digital inclusion and digital equity. And we'll talk more about ways to advocate for the Digital Equity Act soon. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to shift over to talking about digital discrimination. The rules for digital discrimination went into effect in March of 2024. The rules for digital discrimination cover any aspect of broadband internet access that impedes, impairs, or denies equal access to that service. This could look like discrimination in pricing, customer service issues, and network and infrastructure upgrades. The rules protect consumers even if there was not an intent to discriminate. This means that if someone was impacted by discrimination, the provider will be responsible even if the discrimination was not intentional. However, the new FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, in a task force, he stopped funding for the Digital Discrimination Task Force on January 21st of this year as part of the FCC's ending of any promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is in response to the DEI executive order. So the funding for this program moving forward is also uncertain. All individuals and communities can and should file complaints with the FCC if you are noticing digital discrimination, provide details about your concern, and if you also have feelings about the need to keep the Digital Inclusion Task Force, you can also submit complaints or use the complaint submission process to share your feelings about that. And Pamela shared that in the chat for you. And lastly, I'm going to talk about broadband labels. We're super excited to see broadband labels. The idea of a broadband label is that it looks similar to a nutrition label that you see on food to make information about broadband easy for customers and people researching plans to understand. So as of October of last year, all ISPs must display the broadband label it's called the point of purchase. What that means, it looks a little different for different internet service providers. So some internet service providers or ISPs will have their broadband label just forward on the page discussing the plan. Others, you need to enter your address, and they will then provide the broadband labels for plans that are in your area specifically. I would encourage you to check and see if you can find your broadband label for your plan and make sure it matches things like the pricing, your data allowances, other performance metrics matches what you're actually getting with your internet plan. All right, next slide, please. And I wanted to share this resource with you. It's a State Digital Equity Implementation Manual. We created this manual specifically to help states implement their digital equity plans. But it's really a great resource for anybody looking to start plans. We cover things like best practices and tips for implementing new programs, as well as recommendations and support for subgrants. As somebody applying for subgrants, you can find that out, information also useful, as well as measurement, program evaluation, and ways to help you make your programs more sustainable. And next slide, please. All right, as I mentioned, we are concerned about Digital Equity Act funds being threatened currently in our environment. So we created a suite of resources and tools that can be used to help you support advocacy and build awareness around the Digital Equity Act. This webpage has a variety of tools. We have templates to help you write to your policymakers, resources to help you find your federal, state, and local elected officials, ideas to help celebrate digital inclusion programs that you may be doing, as well as agendas and other resources there. Okay, and next slide. I'll pass it back over to Pamela.
Thanks so much, Shauna. Just a few more things. We do have working groups. So if you are interested in joining any of them, here are the contact information. So we have a digital inclusion working group. So in order to be part of that, you have to be part of the NDIA community and also be part of a digital inclusion coalition. We have a digital navigator working group. So to be part of that, you have to be part of a digital navigator program. And then we also have a community-led digital workforce alliance group. That agenda is created by our community. And if you are interested in joining that, you can reach out to me. And I also want to plug our Net Inclusion Conference. So this May, we're having our annual conference called Net Inclusion. It is the nation's premier digital inclusion conference, and it will be May 20th through the 22nd at the Gila River Indian Community. So some topics for sessions and workshops include federal policies that are impacting digital equity, digital inclusion best practices across the country, digital inclusion programming like digital navigators, digital health equity, accessibility, and community-centered work. So visit our digitalinclusion.org/netinclusion page to register. And after that, we'd like to invite you to join the NDIA community if you're not part of it already. We want you to tap into our 2,000 plus affiliates. You will get access to our monthly community calls, subscription to our very popular community listserv, and receive monthly newsletter updates. All right. We've got a minute or two. I looked at the chat. It doesn't seem like anyone has any questions, but we can stay for just a few minutes in case somebody does. You can put your question in the chat. But if not, I want to thank all of you for joining us for this webinar. The recording, presentation slides, and resources will be shared afterwards. And we just want to say thank you for all of your hard work. And we are here to support you if you have any questions. Kimmy, let me put the link in the chat, and I'll also put it in the follow-up email of where you can join. Thank you. All right. Okay, y'all, if there are no more questions, I will end this and thank you all for joining us. Take care.